Skål. Skål. Skål.
Is the
Again?
I don't. I think that we
But it
are.
starts to have something about
It
how
doesn't.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Outer Sounds. We're here today with Ben Vida, and we'll be chatting about his music and his new record with Leah Bertucci, Murmurations, which is the August selection for Outer Sounds. I've got a copy right here. This will be going out to subscribers in early August. So happy to have Ben here, my old friend. Haven't chatted with him in a while. How you doing, man?
So nice to see you, man.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. Before we get into the new record, I wanted to just kind of chat about what you've been up to the last few years. I know that you moved upstate, like for real. When was that? A few years ago now?
I think 2017, maybe 2018, right around there.
Yeah, right before the pandemic. You're just outside of Woodstock, right?
Yep. Shady, New York.
Shady, yeah.
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, since you've been settled in there, like, what have you been doing? It seems to me, from what I've talked to you about, that you've like found a nice little community, and obviously still making a lot of work, but also like playing some shows in the area and doing collaborating with different people and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a surprising amount of community up here, and of course there has been for like decades.
Yeah.
Just people sort of like moving up from the city, and then of course after the last couple of years, it's just been a bonkers influx of people moving up here. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if things, I think I was continuing to follow the thread of a lot of projects that I'd started in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, things sort of slowed down, and there was time to, examine sort of how I wanted projects to manifest and kind of get into a different day-to-day temporal existence, not just because of the pandemic, but, because like being up here, you get into these really different rhythms. There's
Sure.
a certain kind of like city urgency, falls away, and so there's a wonderful kind of groups of people up here to get together and jam with, which is amazing. I don't feel like I did much jamming, like for the 10 years I was in New York, and that's like really nourishing and fun to do. And there's like great house shows, and there's good little bars and clubs doing shows too. So
I was going to say, it seems in a way like you've connected to some things that you used to do in Chicago for so many years, like improvising and playing smaller gigs and just jamming with different people and stuff like that.
Totally. Yeah. And of course, there was this kind of wild moment when we were first living up here where I ran into this promoter up here. He said, "Oh, hey, do you know that Fred Longberg Home lives in Kingston?" Which is like 20 minutes away from where we are. And, like total time warp moment of starting to hang with Fred again and make music with him and stuff.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah. But last year, I guess it was last year, Leah Bertucci was up for the summer staying at this artist residency, Birdcliff Residency, which is like just right around the corner from where Katie and I live. And Leah and I had met before, but just kind of like at a party here or a show there. And we're like, well, we're neighbors now. Let's get together and hang out. And then very quickly, we're like, oh, like we should probably be jamming. And,
yeah, totally.
And then, like kind of almost before we knew it, had developed a pretty, I think, interesting and somewhat unique language, as a duo, and, made the record. So, yeah.
So we'll get into the record, I guess. The record is pretty much constructed from like improvisations and just jamming, and then started to piece it together into a
Yeah.
final record. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the original idea was that we would make recordings of Leah playing, playing her instruments,
Yeah.
and then I would use those. I'd create samples out of those, and
Okay.
and then we would improvise. And I would, besides doing a little bit of like synthesis stuff, would mostly use those materials and kind of recontextualize them and repitch
Okay.
them.
Yeah.
And that was how it started, and that was the language that we started to work with. And then, Leah has this history of doing the vocal tape manipulation, and
Right,
so
right.
we spent some evenings like just goofing around with that and like really laughing, and just like stoned mountainside.
That's the vibe. That's the vibe.
And
very stony and mellow, and just
and like with
odd
no
and cool record.
like intention of any outcome besides just playing around. But then we really liked it, and we were like, okay, voice should be more featured in this. And right, and just like you said, I took all of those different jam sessions and started to construct the pieces out of them. So the material all was created out of improvisation, but what you hear on the record is fairly composed after the fact.
It's cool. I think it's interesting, the record, in a way, how collaborations go. It gives you some space to like do some things that you maybe aren't doing normally or in your own work, or things that you used to do or explore. But it's interesting. It sounds like Leah is very much making like electroacoustic music in like the true sense, like instruments and tapes and electronics, and creating these, long pieces. But it seems like she kind of drew your sound into that, kind of acoustic blend, because then it's like, you're folding in, things that you've been working with recently, like voice and modular synth, obviously. But then also like, you broke out the accordion and like put that on the record, which is amazing. You used to play that like, back in the day. And
it felt so nice to break out the accordion again, like through a ring modulator into an amp, and it's just like, it sounds like an airplane taking off. It's like, oh, this is something I should be doing.
Which I love. And also there's a funny, just like a weird little connection. So the record I sent out in July was Pauline Oliveros's accordion and voice, and there's that like famous picture of her sitting in front of Mount Tremper with the accordion and like the dog on the side. You guys are in the same vibe zone there.
That's I really love that thought. And it's nice to feel like part of some continuum or something. So,
totally.
I had been making some little recordings. Like I did something for Super Pang. Is that what that Italian label?
Oh right, yeah.
It was like more like electroacoustic, but it was sampling sampling off records. It was sampling actually like a ton of Wolfgang Fuchs, and and so it was very, very nice and I was really into that kind of like music concrete stuff instead of like purely synthesized stuff.
Right.
And
you sampling on the computer or modular?
Sampling on the computer and then playing it off of the modular. So using like a 301,
using a sampler module to manipulate stuff. Yeah, cool.
And so it was really nice to then start to do this project with Leah and have all of the sampled material be generated from within the group.
That's cool. So I see. So you like recorded Leah, brought the samples into the modular system, and then manipulated them that way.
And it's nice. I've tried to do sampling stuff just in the computer, and I just haven't found a way of interfacing with it that feels as fluid or as much like an instrument. Whereas the setup I have on the modular with the 301 feels very much like I'm performing. You know?
Yeah, for sure. It's a totally different way of like working with a sampler, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah. So as far as like you guys are performing this material live a little bit, and you said you're doing a residency shortly. How does that work when you guys are presenting the stuff live?
It's cool. We played a couple of shows at Cafe Auto this spring, and we're going to go back to Europe and play some little festivals and stuff in the fall. And it's interesting because we have the record now. We've lived with it, and so in a way, we've sort of gotten to know what we do through listening back to that work. And so I feel like there's something that's happening compositionally when we're improvising now, where there's a little more clarity. But it still has some of those unavoidable arcs of like periods of searching and then finding and getting in that and then moving into the next thing. And I really like this place in between improvisation and and then like kind of like instant composition. And I don't know exactly how we would parse out the difference between those things, but I feel like in a lot of ways, the sort of intention of what we're doing has something more to do with composition than it does with a history of, free jazz or European improvised music.
Yeah, it's like you've developed with the record, you've developed like a sonic language, and then now you're kind of improvising with that language, I suppose,
Yeah, and I think there's
sound world or whatever.
Yeah, and I think there's some intention within the duo to start to set things a little more and perhaps start to work with more predetermined forms or predetermined language. We're interested in bringing more text and more voice into the project, and whether that text or that language is improvised or whether it's predetermined is what we're now just beginning to discover. So
yeah. Well, it's cool. It's a great record. I'm super into it. Yeah. I think people will dig it, and I've been trying to it's on Leah's own label too, just kind of like a smaller thing, but I've been trying to find stuff for Outer Sounds that's like on smaller labels, kind of
and I love all these artist run labels. I mean, it's just such a, and it's viable, and it's so direct. I was really I feel like we could have shopped this around and we would have found a home for it, but when Leah wanted to do it herself, I thought, well, this is even better.
Yeah, it makes sense. And she's done a few of her own records now too, which is kind of, so she's got some established, way of doing it.
And I ran to the post office today, putting copies to something, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, we're, it's cottage industry.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. Totally.
It, of course, you've been doing it for years. So
yeah. Cool. So I want to talk about, what music you're working on now and what's coming up next for you.
Sure. Well, so I'll have a new record out in the spring of a collaboration with Yarnwire and the vocalist Nina Dante. And that record is coming out on Shelter Press, and it's called The Beat My Head Hit. And it's a piece I don't know quite how to describe what it is. It's for voice and ensemble, and it's a very text heavy piece. It's Nina and I sort of speaking these long texts that I wrote. And actually the members of Yarnwire are singing it with us as well. And that's a lot of the work that I've been doing over the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, I've been slowly working towards this more like text-based, text-forward work, but none of it's been released. And so it's pieces that I've performed live, but unless you've seen those performances, very little of it exists, online or anywhere. And so I'm really excited to see that work come out and I'm still working on new pieces in that mode. It feels very important to me that that work can be kind of scalable,
Right.
just considering the state of touring and everything. Like to be able to bring it out in the world with the full ensemble will be amazing. But also finding other modes of delivering it, you know, maybe with just like
Right.
two voices and electronics or whatever it might be. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've seen or heard some of your previous work with voices. You know, you were doing some video voice work,
Yeah.
you know, that was more of like art installation or, you know, kind of exhibiting it that way. But like you said, you haven't really done that for a record per se.
Not really, no.
When did, you know, why, I'm not sure what the question is, but like, when did you want to start working with voice, and when did it kind of click with you like, hey, I really want to explore this, you know, this kind of path or whatever?
I mean, you know, growing up in Chicago for all those years, you know, I was playing in rock and roll bands. My brother and I would sing together. I mean, you and I made music where we were singing, you know, and so, you know, I've always had a relationship to being a vocalist, even if it's something very, you know, very little of it's, you know, been brought to the stage or onto recordings. But when I was doing more work towards like the gallery or art space, I became quite interested in creating these text pieces that were you know, works on paper, and then would function sort of as abstract narratives or scores for these video pieces. And you know, I've always had a practice of writing, but again, it's always been really kind of like kept in the studio, pretty private. And so that was the first time that some of that kind of work started to make it out into the world, and it was really a pleasure to make, and a different way of interacting with people. And so, you know, this ends up being kind of an extension of that. But the return to working with voice came through doing synthesis, you know, and getting into, you know, the granular production of sound through synthesis and being like, okay, well, the voice and the synthesizer go so well together. The voice is something that I feel like as you become more and more obsessed with producing sounds of your own, synthesizing sounds of your own, the voice is like this high watermark or whatever, something to reach, you know. And it took a few years to go from using the voice in a very abstract way or working with, you know, just kind of phonetic language to starting to really consider the linguistic qualities of the writing, you know. And when I was working on some of this stuff, there was definitely a moment where I didn't know I was going to be the vocalist in it. I was like, oh, maybe I'll write this piece for this singer, or this, you know. And then I realized, but I want, like, it's the thing I like to do on stage the most. I was like, well, what you know, because like, and you know how this is, like, you reach a point where you've been playing music a long time, you've been touring a long time, and you're like, well, what do I actually want to do on stage? You know, and I'd been doing a lot of like sitting behind a computer, you know, and I was like, oh, okay, I might need to do something else, you know. And so
I mean, it's like it became something fun or different for you to do. That's just that feels natural and just, you know, something else that you haven't done before, I guess.
Yeah, and something that's kind of like intimidating, and so that when it happens, there's, you know, there's stakes, you know, and it really means a lot to me to get the chance to do it, you know. So
I feel like, you know, there's, you know, I know we've talked about this a lot, but, you know, the obvious like touchstones would be like, you know, some of the early electronic guys who were interested in like phonetics, you know, and voice synthesis, but then also, you know, like Charles Dodge and those guys. But then there's the Henri Chopin school of like sound poetry and manipulated text and voice. And then there's obviously the touchstone of Robert Ashley's music, which I know has been a huge like inspiration for you and me too. And I think that I listened to the record last night all the way through and just totally love it, man. I think it's like, it's I think you're right. It's like, it feels like a culmination of what you've been working on, and this very very fully realized composition. It has this like great flow and balance to it, and it kind of maintains your interest throughout the whole piece. It's really nice. But I hear a lot of Robert Ashley in it, obviously. But the thing that
large, I
yeah,
mean,
of course he does. Like if you're
yeah.
using voice, like, and especially anything that starts to get more like colorful narrative kind of story, like you're gonna touch into his stuff. But the person that actually brought to mind the most was Daniel Lentz. Do you know his music at all?
Oh no, I don't.
Yeah, he was part of like the Cold Blue, like Southern California, like
Oh yeah,
minimalist
okay.
scene. He has a few pieces that have that very, like, your piece has that vibe. It's got this like very like cool minimalism kind of like thing going on, which I love.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe
You
it,
you gotta send me some of his music.
yeah.
Yeah.
He uses voices a little bit, but a lot of it's some of it's like wordless vocals or just more abstract kind of stuff, but then with the kind of classic like pianos and synths and repetitive melodies and harmonies and stuff. But anyway, that was just
Yeah.
something I was thinking of when I listened to it. But
yeah, it's interesting because obviously, like, I saw those three Ashley operas performed right when I had first moved to New York in 2008, and like it was like it was kind of like a huge deal. And I feel like making this record now, I'm like, it's something that started like the first night of seeing one of those pieces performed live, and was just like, I knew the work before, but I hadn't seen it. I hadn't seen a performance of it.
Right.
But I have to say that in a lot of ways, it's been really different kinds of music that's influenced this recording. Like the Ashley stuff is sort of like looming there inevitably. But I mean, I found that I was listening to like the Pet Shop Boys a lot, or I was listening to, like there's all these places where there's, or, like The Fall, or, like Marky Smith's, and like all of these places where there's sort of this way of delivering lyrics that's somewhere between speaking and singing, and
right.
So often if I kind of got into the weeds with the language, I would always default to the rhythm of something or how it worked, the musicality of it over the meaning of it, and it's interesting to kind of have this thing, because I certainly don't write poetry or think about things in those terms, or write, do creative writing. I don't know what you would even call it, but so it's always like kind of defaulting to this toolbox that's, just from a history of music making more than anything.
Right. I actually had a question with this new piece. Did you compose the text first and then write the music for it, or vice versa? And also, like, how did you compose the music for Yarn Wire? Is it like kind of, like, I don't know, I think of Terry Riley in C, like little segments that they repeat for a certain number of time and then switch to the next thing, or
right. Yeah, the text came first, and then it kind of did like a leapfrogging thing, where new text would be formed as the music was coming together. And in terms of it, originally I composed it through Composed, but there's so much repetition in it by the time I brought those like sort of like, the scores that were like so unnecessarily thick or with repeats, then Yarn Wire kind of reversed it, engineered it into something that could be, if not memorized, like understood very simply, because the music is very, like the musical composition is really simple stuff. The way that I composed that was really just sitting at home with a MIDI keyboard and just playing all the parts.
Right.
And then,
But then you got the voice and text rhythms over the top of the music then after that, or did it kind of
it all, I think so much of it was just like what the tempo was, and I would understand the voice rhythms in that tempo, and then and it's, you know, it was like one of these, and I'm sure like so many people can relate to this. It's like an aspect of it would sort of be the focus and move forward, and then that would inform, you know, it's like those things kind of continue to evolve in proximity to each other.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of, like, after all the recordings were made, there was a lot of bringing stuff back into the studio and reconsidering some of the compositional forms and stuff. So in a sense, even though we were performing these pieces live right before the pandemic started, by the time I was recording them, it became like very much a studio record.
Right.
With overdubbing and creating, you know, it's not, and I don't even think it has I don't think it even pretends to be sort of like a live documentation of a ensemble, you know.
Right. Yeah. So super excited for that record to come out. That's
so happy you got to hear it. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll be listening to it more for sure. What else are you working on? You know, this is obviously a finished thing that's coming out. You have some new things that you're working on.
I'm working on some duo vocal stuff with this fantastic singer, Amy Grenux, who I met actually. I've been making music for the choreographer Faye Driscoll, and I met Amy through Faye because she's one of the dancers in Faye's ensemble, and so that's a lot of what I'm doing. I'm doing a lot of composition for Faye, doing kind of in this mode, like for vocalists, for the dancers who are doing a lot of the singing. So Faye had seen documentation of the Yarn Wire piece and brought me to do that kind of work with her. And it was nice. We were in Germany for a couple of months this spring working, you know, I was there kind of like in process every day. And I mean, it's intense.
I bet,
and it's definitely pushing what I'm doing into some new places that I would not have arrived at on my own. So that's exciting to me.
So this would be voice pieces incorporated with some dance. A dance.
And we did kind of a premiere of a first version of the work that we're continuing in New York the rest of this year and into next year. And it's very interesting it's very interesting to see how the quality of the voice changes. It's for 6 voices, 6 dancers, 6 voices, how the qualities of the voices change when they're put into these, you know, into motion, and really wonderful moments where we would be rehearsing stuff as a group and no one would be moving. We're like, is this working? And then people would start to move and it's like, okay, this is how this actually functions. And so there's all of a sudden there's this whole other consideration within the compositional practice that comes forward.
Right, because you have, you know, especially these pieces that you're doing, there's so much rhythm in them, obviously, and you know, based off of the sonic rhythm of it. But then you could, you know, either mirror that in the dance or have like a polyrhythm in the movement, you know, going against the
and that's really what we found happening a lot of. And I would really marvel at their ability, like the performer's ability to do it.
Do both at the same time.
Yeah, because I know how it is to perform this stuff like sitting in a chair. You know?
It's like singing,
you know,
it's like singing and playing drums or something, you know. It's like, I don't know how people do that. It's crazy.
Totally.
Yeah.
So
well, we only got a few minutes left here, but wrap it up here and you know, say thanks for talking to me today. I really appreciate it. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, it'll be fun to send this record out to people and see what they think. But
cool. Leah and I were both so happy that you chose to curate it into your series. It's such a great series, and everything you're doing out of the shop is so awesome. So we feel really
thanks, man.
Honored to be included in it. So
it's been interesting. I have like I have to like plan quite a bit ahead, you know, for Outer Sounds. So I usually have like at least 4 months ahead of time, just because something that happened last year was I had something planned and then it got totally delayed and derailed, and I had to like scramble at the last minute to get you know. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make sure I've got like a few different things like, you know, in process. And the thing that I've learned actually is I make sure I get the records in hand, and then I have like I have them for a while before I even send them out, you know. So it's like in case something happens, I can switch to something else. So
there's no predicting right now.
Yeah.
So
That's pretty crazy. All right, man. Great talking to you.
All right, Greg. Great talking to you too.
Yeah. Let's talk soon when you get back from your various travels.
Okay, that sounds great. All right, take care, buddy.
All right, man.
Okay, bye.